Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Greg Wilpert in Arlington, Virginia. On Tuesday, as protests in Lebanon intensified, sources close to Lebanese Prime Minister Hariri told the media that Hariri intends to resign this week. On that same day, protesters in Lebanon created a human chain across the country, whereupon Hariri tendered his resignation immediately that afternoon. As news of Hariri's resignation hit the streets, protesters responded as follows.
We are a group of people, a spontaneous and peaceful movement, and the government has come and proved that no one can stand in front of the people's will, as what will happen after. The ball is in their court, we know what we want, and we want a transitional government, and we want specialists and knowledgeable people that can take over, most importantly, the monetary file. And after that, we can have early parliamentary elections so that we can change things step by step.
The protests in Lebanon aren't over yet, but the country is experiencing a political transformation of tremendous proportions, and there seems to be no turning back. Joining us to discuss this transformation is Samah Hadid from Beirut. She's a campaigner, advocate, and writer, as well as a commentator on human rights and humanitarian issues in the Middle East and Africa. Thanks for joining us today, Samah.
Good to be with you.
So when we covered the protests last week, it looked like Hezbollah supporters were part of the protests. And there were protests deep in Hezbollah territory, actually, in Sur or Tyre. And then there was a big fight where Hezbollah supporters apparently attacked the protesters, and Hezbollah chairman Hassan Nasrallah pulled his supporters from the protests. How do you explain the sudden change in Hezbollah's position with regard to the protests?
Well, firstly, what's so unprecedented and remarkable about this protest movement is the way in which it has cut across different sectarian lines. It has brought together classes, religious groups, the north to the south. And people have, for the first time, come together, united in their demand to revolt against the political elite and the political class, which they see as largely corrupt, exploitative, and really blocking change in Lebanon. And so we saw for the first time people chanting against their own leaders, and that has included leaders across the entire political spectrum, from the Hariri supporters right through to Hezbollah and Amal supporters. We're seeing really fear being broken and this barrier of fear being lifted now, and people being free to speak out against these leaders. The pressure, of course, has started to bite. And we're seeing this in the responses from political parties, such as Hezbollah and Amal, where they have sent out their supporters, presumably, sent out their supporters to attack the protest movement and protesters on the streets in the south, but also in the capital of Beirut. But people remain undeterred. If anything, the response has been to take to the streets in larger numbers. Whenever the protest movement is attacked by the political elite and their supporters, protesters have been really determined to hold their ground and continue their demands for the entire government, and the entire economic system and political system to be overhauled.
So you referred to the system, that this is a protest against the political system in Lebanon. But it's one that basically is not an authoritarian dictatorship like in some other countries. And when protesters shouted, "The people want to overthrow the regime," which is a direct quote from the 2011 Arab Spring, they apparently didn't just mean to get rid of Prime Minister Assad Hariri. So what is this sectarian system, and why do people want to get rid of it so badly?
What's abundantly clear throughout the country, wherever I've traveled, particularly in the north, but also in Beirut and what we're seeing in the south, is that people don't want to just get rid of one leader. They want the entire political class to be replaced by a new generation of leaders who would put the national interests before their own self-interests. For decades now, Lebanon has been ruled through a sect-based power-sharing system where votes are allocated along religious communities and sectarian groups. But protesters now are fed up, frankly, with this system and are calling for a new electoral system that is fair, it's modern and secular. And with the resignation of Prime Minister Hariri, what we're hoping for now is a transitional arrangement where possibly technocrats and politically independent experts could form a transitional government that is able to address the financial and economic crisis that was looming before the protests took place, that is able to address public services and address the mismanagement that has been in place for decades now in the country. And so with this, hopefully, this new transitional arrangement, a new law and policies can be put in place that would then lead the way to new elections.
I just want to turn briefly to the international dimension of what's going on. That is, many international actors such as the State of Israel, Russia, Syria, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and US all have a stake in the Lebanese sectarian system that we were just talking about. But so far, there's no evidence of foreign intervention in the protests or in their repression, it seems. Do you expect, though, that Israel or Syria or some other country might get involved to keep Lebanon from becoming more democratic?
Well, Lebanon for years now has faced foreign interference, be it from Iran, Saudi Arabia, the US, the EU. It really has been a game of chess for regional forces and international governments to play with. But the protesters and the protest movement is clearly calling for rejection of foreign interference. This is a local and organic movement that is aimed at creating an independent Lebanese identity, and one that can create policies and identity for this country that is locally based and is one that is carried by civil society and the grassroots here. I think the international community, in terms of Western governments being very cautious now. As of yet, they've backed the previous existing government, but that could change with the resignation of the Prime Minister Hariri. We saw today that the Iranian regime are warning against chaos if these protests continue. So there are threats from international actors and regional forces. But the protest movement here is very clear about wanting this to remain independent and for the Lebanese citizens to decide the fate and future of Lebanon.
And so finally, what do you expect to happen next in Lebanon?
Well, we're hoping that the new caretaker government can form a government of technocrats and experts that can address the economic and political crises that we're facing. I think protesters will continue to take to the streets and ensure that real radical political change actually occurs, because people are fed up with the status quo and will not accept any sort of piecemeal reforms or measures. The issue and the uncertainty is around the economic and financial situation of the country, which is on the brink of collapse. And so we urgently need a new transitional arrangement and a government of politically independent experts to really take power and ensure that we're moving in the right direction.
Okay, so we're going to have to leave it there for now, but I'm sure we'll come back to you soon as the situation in Beirut develops and becomes clearer. I was speaking to Samah Hadid, human rights campaigner based in Beirut, Lebanon. Thanks again, Samah, for having joined us today.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining the Real News Network.
Hey y'all, my name is Tharna Noor and I'm a climate crisis reporter here at the Real News Network. This is a crucial moment for humanity and for the planet. So if you like what we do, please support us by subscribing at the link below. Thank you.